metalheads, art aficionados. It's James Kalm, your half-assed report of the guy on the bike. And we're gonna run upstairs here. To the SYLVIA WALD Po Kim Art Gallery. And we're gonna try to get some pictures of an exhibition titled A Time Before We Were Born, curated by Raphael Rubinstein. Stay tuned.
Raphael, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Young, and thank you everyone for coming here. And especially I'd like to thank all the artists who are in the show and are here tonight. This exhibition for me has been, like anytime you do an exhibition, it's an experiment. And you can look at images on your computer as much as you want, but when you actually have the paintings in the space and on the wall, something unexpected things happen. And this show was actually filled with a lot of relationships among the artists that I didn't really know until everything came together. And for instance, one of the interesting things to me today, one of the artists in the show, Judith Linhares, whose work is in this space right over here, who's here tonight. She said to me, "Oh, did you know I was a TA for Roy DeForest, whose work is the first work you see when you come out of the elevator?" I had no idea that there was any connection between you and Roy DeForest. Similarly, three of the artists in the show had all been students of Hans Hofmann. I knew two of them, that Paul Georges and Jan Müller had studied with Hofmann. I did not know that Fay Lansner did. And it's things like that where kind of intuitively I'm thinking about what makes sense to me and the kind of story I want to tell with the work, and that there's like some underlying connection and logic to it that I wasn't aware of. Is really reassuring and thrilling. But really the origin of this exhibition is in the work of Po Kim. And it's thinking about Po Kim's work and also how important, Po Kim experienced a very difficult life in Japan during World War II and Korea after the war. And out of his experiences, out of his traumatic experiences, he created a vision of a kind of harmony and a kind of symbolic realm in which there was a certain kind of perfection and peace, and yet there's also always that kind of sense and awareness of the darkness and the dangers and the challenges of surviving in the world. And I wanted this to be both, so it was in thinking about Po Kim's work and kind of developing, like it was like the seed that then led me to connecting to the work of other artists whose work I was aware of. And I guess I should say that there, like, I'm not going to bore you with all of my ideas here. There's a brochure with an essay, but I also just want to thank Joo Young Choi for giving me the opportunity to try out my ideas in actual space. His wife Led for helping, and for Ann Thurmond and everyone here at the foundation. And it's been really a pleasure, and so just thank you all, and let's go back to whatever you're doing, looking at art or
Thank you. Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Well, this is a wonderful show. Just run through and we'll take a quick overview of the installation. Kathy Bradford. Oh, Mimi Gross. Purvis Young. that's the layout. Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a little shot of the wall text here. I'm not going to read it, but you guys can pause your computers and read what this says. This is a rare pleasure. It's a piece by Roy DeForest. Titled View of Lake Louise, 1979, acrylic on canvas. Roy DeForest was one of the early influences on me, having grown up and gone to school in Idaho. In a lot of ways, we were looking at West Coast art a lot more intently than we were looking at New York art. And Roy was one of 3 or 4 of the well-known Bay Area artists that we were looking at and thinking about. I think William T. Wiley was another one. Robert Aronson, the ceramicist, was another. .75 by 87 inches. Well, Raphael has probably curated at least a couple of the most influential exhibitions of the last 7 or 8 years here in New York. He did a great show. You can go back and check the Kalm Report for his, it was titled Reinventing Abstraction, something like that. This is by Fay Lansner, untitled, 1960, oil on canvas, 60 by 60. Well, I was talking about, okay, we're not going to be able to get this one in the screen at one time, so we'll pan down this. This is by Po Kim, who the gallery is named after. This is 1992 to 1994, acrylic on canvas, 84 by 216 inches. In his introductory statement, Raphael talked about the fact that there were 3 people in this show that had actually studied with Hans Hofmann, Paul Georges, Jan Müller, and I forgot the third one, but I think the reason that that's important is that there was a whole other group of artists that were working figuratively in the 50s and into the 60s, long before it became fashionable to go back and do figurative painting. I guess that would be in the late 70s, early 80s, when neo-expressionism sort of burst on the scene. God, here's a big piece by Archie Rand. It's titled Sister, 1983, acrylic and enamel and crayon on canvas, 56 by 143. Well, I just spoke a little bit with Archie. And Archie has been around for a long time. I was talking to him and I said, there he is right there. I said, gosh, Archie, it's like you've already had a couple of careers. And that's because I think he had his first major exhibition at maybe Tibor Denage when he was about 17 or 18 years old. And, well, he's kept working. We covered a show that he did at Freight Volume maybe 6 months ago. Yeah, strangely, some of those images kind of come back from this piece. This is by Paul Georges. Backyard with Sangapak and Muse. Well, this is nice to see. Paul Georges was kind of an interesting character in the New York painting scene. I think he probably passed away. Oh, it says here 2002, so almost 20 years ago at this point. But he was always kind of a grumpy painter that stuck with figuration and got involved in some kind of interesting legal battles dealing with art critics, and I don't know whether there was plagiarism involved. I still remember I was working as a delivery boy, delivery man for Utrecht Art Supplies, and Paul Georges bought, I think, a 50-yard roll of the biggest, heaviest linen that Utrecht made at the time. It was 116 inches wide, 16 ounces per square yard. And I drove the delivery truck down to his loft on Walker Street, I believe, and I had to throw this thing over my shoulder and lug it up about 4 flights of stairs to his loft. He was on the very top floor. This is by Rafael Ferrer. Composition Villa Soledad. Well, this is another artist that it's nice to see. Raphael was one of the, I think, at the time, hot young painters. Maybe he was a hot, mature painter who was getting a lot of attention. He might have been one of the, what would be considered the New York contingency of the Neo-Expressionism, or they also called it the Actionist painting, which was a reaction against conceptualism and minimalism. And I think a lot of the reason they cut Raphael slack was because he had a lot of Latin influences, and I think he might even have done some public art projects up in Spanish Harlem. Actually a nice piece. This is Grand Night Swim by Kathy Bradford. 40 by 30 inches. Acrylic on canvas. Well, if you've been watching the Kalm Report or the Rough Cuts for any period of time, you know that I've been following and been a fan of Kathy's work for about 20 some odd years. And yeah, I've I've got at least 2 or 3 reports on her shows. It would be interesting. You could probably go back and see what she was doing about 10 years ago, if you like, and then everything in between. And I'm proud to say that I think Kathy is on a hot streak. She's getting into some major shows, major collections, and it's nice to see someone that's finally stuck to their guns and they're getting some recognition. We'll slip into one of the 2 back galleries. This is Angels with Ants and Voodoo Riders. I finally made it up to the Met last week. One of my sons was back from Las Vegas, and we had to go up and see the Souls Grown Deep collection that they were displaying part of at the Met. I think the reason that we had to do that is my son, he was about 13 or 14, and we were invited to go to Atlanta and see the Arnett collection, and so he was with us as we went through the warehouse that Bill Arnett kept his collection in at the time, and it was great to go and drop through the Met and see some of the same pieces. Purvis passed away about eight years ago, and he was one of the, I guess, major people that the Arnett collection preserved, along with Thornton Dial and Lonnie Hawley. And I've even got a small Purvis piece myself at home. I think the thing that's attractive for a lot of painters, I know there are other people in New York, some of the painters, people like Bryce Martin, that have collected Purvis's work, but it's his wonderful use of the brushstroke to create his figures. This is a major piece by Po Kim. This is Contemplation 1, 72 by 120 inches. I was looking at this, and particularly this figure and the gray background made me think of Matisse's piano lesson. I don't know, it's from maybe 1918, something like that. It's up at the Modern. And as I was listening to the opening statements, the gentleman that runs the foundation was saying that I guess maybe this space that we're in was Po Kim's loft, maybe his studio. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. And that's kind of a Matisse-ian green as well. Donna Moylan, titled People Painted. I thought this was an interesting use of silkscreen. This is 1993 oil and acrylic and silkscreen on canvas, 44 by 46 inches. looking at this and I'm actually thinking about Jules de Belencourt and some of the pieces that he did with his kind of broad dynamic landscapes and little figures in there, but Jules was probably still in high school when Donna painted this. Chris Johanson. You and everyone else in some way. 2016 acrylic and household paint on found wood. Well, I bumped into Chris, I guess it's been a couple of weeks ago, at the Jack Hanley Gallery, and I was joking with him. He spent a lot of time in Portland, and I was saying that, and now he's in Bushwick, and I said, a lot of people would like to call certain parts of Brooklyn, Brooklandia, because it's the same kind of interesting and kind of sustainable hipsters that you would find in Portland that they're always poking fun at. This is actually a nice painting. So he's got kind of two overlapping panels and then this upper black rectangle with the splattered paint and the stars kind of lays across here, and well, you get a kind of a sculptural volumetric effect along with the graphic painterly qualities. And I like the way that Chris goes from a very fine articulate figure here to the more chunky urgent kind of broad brush broom painting. And we got a little tiny piece of text. I'm sorry. You heard this before, haven't you? Some more from Donna Moylan. It's titled Plymouth. 2016 watercolor on paper, 21 by 28 inches. Well, Donna has again used this rectangular form, except here it's a watercolor that's collaged on top of another watercolor. I guess that's a little fabric addition that she's collaging with. I like the marbleized paper here. Okay, one more gallery. Okay, well, I guess I should say a little bit about Raphael's theme for the show. The time before we were born, they were talking about, I guess everybody's been depressed for about a year and a half, and they were looking for some hope, some remnant, something to comfort them, to let them know that the world is not falling apart. And of course, the idea of utopia and Arcadia is always a great place to fall back to. So this is by this lady, Susan B. Congratulations. Who is it?
It's me and my husband, Charles Bernstein.
Charles Bernstein. Isn't he a poet?
He's a poet.
That's what I heard.
This is us when we were in our 20s. It's a reminisce because I painted it many years ago.
You mean that was last year?
It was 2010. Well,
When you were in your 20s?
when I was in my 20s, it was 1973. We lived in the rainforest. It was called Western. It was, see, that's why the trees are falling off the painting. Because they were falling off.
That's oil and linen. They say it's 34 by 50 inches, but I would say it's more like 34 by 32, maybe?
You're right.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, this is definitely not 34 by 52.
Okay, this is another piece by you, by Susan. Idlewilds. 2011. Well, Susan's husband, Charles Bernstein, is maybe one of the most highly recognized and engaged poets in New York. And I'm not a specialist on poetry, but I do know that there are a lot of people that consider him maybe one of the major heirs to the New York School of Poetry, and I know that he does a lot of archival work and organizing readings, and I think he's involved with some publishing houses and gets a lot of poetry stuff happening. I kind of like this central form. You got flowers and different various things, and then it gets kind of spiky over here. And Susan also likes to use a pretty flat, matte surface. This is Judith Linhares, titled Water, 2012 gouache on paper. Judith and I had a two-person show at a little gallery out in Ridgewood/Bushwick, probably about 5 years ago, at a gallery called Valentine. And Judith is also a wonderful painter. We're talking about she was the artist assistant or class assistant for Roy DeForest out in California, somewhere out in the East Bay. Okay, I better not dwell too much on this guy's nudity. I had one of my videos with Copley was recently put behind a adults only screen at YouTube. This is by JooYoung Choi. Welcome home. We've been waiting for you. 2015. It's 96 by 72 inches. So we've got acrylic paper and painted canvas on stretch canvas. And yeah, I like the mixed media on this, and JooYoung has left a pretty rugged, pretty spontaneous surface here, so she hasn't gotten finicky. And the little faces and hands are nicely rendered. Also, I like the punchy patterns of color. Suddenly thinking about the support surface painters. This is one of the gems of the show. It's by Jan Müller. Search for the Ball number 2, 1957, oil on canvas, 9 by 12 inches. I was at a conference titled Painters for Painting, Painters for Painters, or Painters, something like that, at the Brooklyn Rail office last Friday night. They had a panel discussion with about 5 or 6 artists and 1 poet, and well, they were talking about the famous artists, their favorite artists. So we had people talking about Henry Darger, Myron Stout, and somehow the name Jan Müller came up, and I was talking to Susan. She said she likes the show because it's really got like 3 or 4 generations of work, and I think Jan Müller, it says here he's born 1922, would be the older group, and I think that Jan Müller is also a very good representative of what I was talking about, a small group of painters. Bob Thompson was one of them, Lester Johnson, maybe even Wolf Kahn, Gandhi Brody, that kept painting figuratively during the late 40s, early 50s, when abstract expressionism kind of steamrolled everybody in the New York scene. We got one more piece to go. This is by Donna Moylan. View the Couple, 2018 oil on panel. Gosh, Donna's got 3 pieces in this show. And I think that she's got a couple of these figures in maybe one of the last pieces we looked at as well. I like the contrast and the means and the various types of ways that she's applying the paint. Fat brush, thin brush, thick paint, thinner paint. Drawing, wiping, sanding, smudging. James Kalm reporting on A Time Before We Were Born, Visions of Arcadia in Contemporary Painting, curated by Raphael Rubinstein, here at the SYLVIA WALD and Pokim Art Gallery, 417 Lafayette Street. I guess this is the East Village. Thanks for watching. You can like, subscribe, and share. And you can leave your comments, criticisms, discussion points, ideas, and suggestions below. And help me with this. Thank you, Kate. Chappy Milkshake? Yeah. Is that you? Milkshake. Chappy Milkshake, thank you. That was good.